Good morning, Your President Aingimea. How are you, sir?
Good, thank you. How are you, Ambassador?
I'm
Hello,
well.
everyone.
Happy Monday to you all. Happy Sunday to those on the other side of the date line. Before I guess I jump into formal introductions, I'll leading off with the president and then with the family. So as we're speaking here right now, on June 29th, 1944, Benedict Jasper, Uncle Benny for all of you, was in the air right now. He took off at 8:15 in the morning. It's 480 miles from Makin Island to Nauru, and they were in a four-man formation. They call it finger four, like this. So Uncle Benny's plane was here, the lead was here, and there were two others to the right of the lead in formation. So the Mitchell bomber goes about 275 miles an hour, so they were well on their way to, final approach, being over the target. So we're honored to have you as the surviving family members and ancestors of Benedict Jasper with us. And I love, beautiful seeing his photos there in the background of you, Catherine, on the shelf.
Yes.
Thank you. Just a quick summation. So the Coral Princess that he was on, and he was staff sergeant, was assigned to the 7th Air Force, 41st Bombardment, 820th Bombardment Squadron, again, nicknamed the Coral Princess. It had a woman with a hula skirt, and there's a scoreboard with the markings indicating the number of combat missions flown and in the time. So they had flown at least 28 combat missions. As I mentioned, they took off about 8:15, piloted by Lieutenant James and co-piloted by Lieutenant Hansen, and 8,000 feet. So they were en route at this time, and it was targeted by, when they were over Nauru, they were targeted by 127 millimeter anti-aircraft guns that will show you photos of here that I took when I visited during my accreditation with His Excellency back in early February, and I'll tick through a couple of those later on. But they were hit. It hit the bomb bay just before the bombs were to be released, and it took a direct hit, and it disintegrated over Nauru at that point. And was blessed to go up with my colleagues who had were on the accreditation swing to in great difficulty, heat, and dwindling darkness to find some of the elements of the plane that remained. I just wanted to lead that off before we just open up a bit of a dialogue and reflect, learn more about you as a family and Uncle Benedict. I have the honor, we'll lead off with an introduction of you, President Aingimea, for your reflections, I guess, on the history, and then we can open it up to the family, 2 or 3 of them who know the most about Staff Sergeant Jasper, and I can tick through a couple of photos along the way. But we're delighted to have you with us this morning. It's good to do virtually.
Thank you. Hello everyone from the tiny island in the Pacific. We may be a tiny island, but we have a lot of history regarding World War II. And also, even though we are tiny, we're considered one of the giants of the Pacific. So welcome to you all from Nauru. And a big hello. In Nauru, when we say hello, we basically say "Orete," which means "How are you?" We don't say, our greeting always is to ask about somebody's health. So we say "Orete," and because that's how pleasant we are and when we greet people. Now, in regards to the Coral Princess, it has been part of our history since the time it was taken down. At the time the Coral Princess was shot down, there was only a handful of Nauruans here, because the Japanese policy at that time was any island in the Pacific that they occupied, they wanted to take a whole bunch of the occupants of that particular country and move it somewhere else. Because if they move them somewhere else and they are in another country, the policy is that those people will not basically stand up and fight for that country, because it is not theirs. The only reason there was a handful of Nauruans left on the island was because there was a Japanese ship that came and it was torpedoed by an American submarine. And that's why that small remnant of Nauruans didn't leave. Quite a fair few of them were taken over to a place we call Chuuk, which you guys should be familiar with. It's called the Federated States of Micronesia. Now, in regards to the Coral Princess, the history of it, we really did not know there was an American plane. We always thought it was an Australian. It was till I became an adult, around about 17, 18, that I found out it was an American plane. And they have been always held as to be, well, heroes, because they came to Nauru and were basically part of the front line of the American troops to take back the Pacific and give it back to the Pacific Islanders. As you probably know, the reason why there wasn't an American invasion here, and because we're a hilly country and we're not an atoll. That's why it was the Americans invaded basically Marshall Islands, or the Japanese were, and the Battle of Tarawa, because those were flat places and they could just easily go across them. Whereas Nauru's got a bit more hills than atoll, so it was a bit tougher. And therefore, the only missions that they had over here was the bombing raids. One of the things that also happened was Nauruans learnt very quickly what happens when there is a bombing raid. You basically drop flat on the ground and you open your mouth, because if you close your mouth and you're on the ground and bombs start going off, it can actually rupture your inside. So that was one of the first things that Nauruans learned during Second World War. Which there was a bombing raid, you just go flat on the ground, you open your mouth so that the percussion of the bombs actually goes outside of your body. And so, but like I said, it was America that really helped us become free again. And after the World War II, in the United Nations, America was one of the countries that stood up for us and basically said Nauru needs to be an independent. So on behalf of a very grateful people, we thank you, America, for always supporting Nauru in our difficult circumstances. Now we've got a new fight called coronavirus. That is an enemy that we do not see, and he's a silent and deadly predator. And by the grace of God, we have managed to keep our borders locked and free from coronavirus. And again, we thank you, because the government of the United States is sending us ventilators to help in our battle against coronavirus. So whenever Nauru's been in a difficult situation with the occupation by the Japanese in World War II, and now we've got a new kind of terrorist on our hands, which is a virus, America has always stood by with Nauru. So on behalf of my country, thank you very much.
Honored to be next to your side, President Aingimea. Maybe before I shift to some introductions of the family, if you could just maybe, if you're willing to, just share a little bit of history about your father that you learned later in life, and what he endured, and really didn't talk about directly with you.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Joseph Cella. I'll just give you a bit of an introduction. My father was a missionary in Papua New Guinea for close to 9 to 10 years. But how he became a missionary started off during World War II. As I've told you before, there was Nauruans who were taken from Nauru to Chuuk, and they were basically forced slave labor. They were made to do by the Japanese occupational forces to do a number of things, including building airstrips. But building the airstrip was on another atoll away from where they kept the Nauruan population. And at one time, Dad never relayed this story to me. This story was told to me by another person whom found out the story from Dad. Dad hardly ever spoke about his wartime experiences. It was basically he just clams up. He talked to other people little bits, and you pick it up, and they picked it up, and they put the story together. So what had happened was, Dad saw that there was a bombing run happening on the island where Mom and my two older siblings were, and he said, you can't see the planes because they're so small, but all you saw was a puffs of the bomb blast that was happening. And so Dad was on another island working on doing the airstrip there, and he said he went to the beach and he prayed to God, and he said to God, if you get me onto the other side, I swim, and I get onto the other side, I'll be yours forever. And so he jumped into the ocean and swam. I don't know how long he swam, but it took a few hours. He rested in between and swam. He got to the place where Mom and my older siblings were, and the Japanese occupational forces saw him, and they said to him, "Who are you and what are you doing here?" And he basically told them, "I'm on Nauru and I swam from the other island." They couldn't believe him because it was a shark-infested waters. So they strung him up by his thumbs. They held him right up, and they started beating him because they didn't believe him. The only reason they stopped was because they thought he had died. And they left him. Mom came along, and some other Nauruans came along, cut him down, and nursed him back to life. And the rest is history. He went to Australia, got his qualifications as a theologian, then went to Papua New Guinea as a missionary, and hence my strong Christian faith.
Wow. President Aingimea's father, he won't say this. He is a really iconic figure on the island of Nauru, a respected leader, minister. In fact, in my office, I have hanging a stamp collection that commemorates his life that His Excellency kindly gave me when I was there. I think a unique opportunity I appreciate that story. I mean, just a visceral reaction when you hear the suffering that some endured, and now to have your family, the Jasper family, connected with him, your family, the Jaspers, who were also so impacted through Staff Sergeant Jasper's passing. So thank you for that, President Aingimea. I'd like to turn to Catherine Hopper. Catherine, if you could just introduce yourself and your relationship to Staff Sergeant Jasper, and offer any reflections you may have, and then we'll continue on with other introductions with your family members gathered. But thank you for participating.
Thank you for hosting us, Mr. Ambassador. My mother was the second child in the family. Benedict was the first child. Benedict was born August 30, 1922, and my mother was born December 25, 1923.
Christmas Day.
Christmas Day. And she and Benny were very close. My mother died 3 years ago on Holy Thursday.
Wow.
And she wept for her brother so profoundly in the last days of her life. She still mourned him so deeply, because during the war and after the war, everyone just had to keep going on just to stay alive. My dad, also a veteran of the war in the South Pacific, he flew a B25s over Japan. My mother told stories about Benny. She said he was a sweet and sensitive young man. We have a number of letters here that I stayed up half the night reading, and there were the letters of an 18-year-old boy to his friend who was already in the military. The letters telling about all the things that 18-year-old boys want to talk about didn't have to do much with the military, except that he really wanted to join up. Um, and the family was very, very close. Well, there were 4 children. Benny was the oldest, then Mary, then Agnes, whose daughter is Christine and whose son is Ben, and then Anthony, whose son is Mark and whose granddaughter is Stephanie and whose daughter is Connie. But among those 3 surviving siblings, there are 26 first cousins, and we were very, very close. We remained close all of our lives. And when I was a little girl, I was born in 1948, very shortly after the war. We were Catholic. Every single night, we got down on our knees and said the rosary and prayed for Uncle Benny every single night. So he is deep in our hearts.
Catherine, thank you for that. I would be remiss, or I was remiss, in not just giving it a little bit of additional context. So I did a brief YouTube video of my time there, of the wreckage. Some of you may have seen it. And it was only on the ride down back to the hotel where I was staying that I discovered that one of the crew members was from the great state of Michigan, my home state, where we have a farm just outside of Ann Arbor. And so I was remiss in describing that connection with and the significance of it, which really led to our connecting Stephanie way back when. And that is, he is from Kearney, Michigan, which is in the Upper Peninsula. Very beautiful, rustic, still unspoilt part of our land. President Aingimea will have to get you there when you come visit. And
it's on my bucket list. It's on my bucket list.
And
don't hurry. They're going to probably put you to work.
The Jasper family is still in business. I'm sure you'll hear a little bit more about their business, but Uncle Benedict, perhaps some others can reflect on it. But for many years, they've owned a sugar shack, which is a place where maple sap is processed in the spring of the year, where winter is transitioning into spring, and the water is sucked up through the trees, and it's expelled and boiled down to the beautiful American maple syrup that I know you're familiar with, Your Excellency. So I will shift now to, I think, Connie and Christine, and maybe you could just briefly introduce yourselves and your relationship to Uncle Benedict.
Okay, I'm Connie Jasper Berger, and Uncle Benny was my dad's oldest brother. My dad was Tony Jasper, and this is my cousin Christine.
And my mother, Agnes, was the 3rd child in the family. Wow. So when we would ask her about Uncle Benny, she would say, well, you know, I was only 15 when he went into the service. And so we were always so curious about him. Thankfully, Kathy's mom, Mary, was much more talkative. And over the years, she passed on information to me and the letters that Benny wrote home. And it's very interesting when I look through them and see he was very close to our Grandma Jasper. And the salutations, he would say, dear Mom and Pop, dearest mother, to my mom, dear Egg, dear Aggie, my dear mother. Your loving son is how he would sign off. So he was very energetic, very intelligent, and he hoped that he would get some kind of training so that he could maybe do some work after he got out of the service, like mechanical training. But instead, I'm not sure if Kathy already shared this, he didn't make the physical to be a pilot because he was colorblind. He was trained to be a tail gunner. It was explained to him that to be colorblind was an advantage to identifying camouflage. So you could tell by how some of his letters were written that he was disappointed in what he had to do, but in listening to the president talk, it's like now I feel like he did something heroic, that he gave up his life for freeing people. And
A nation. Help free a nation.
I think that his story.
Give me feedback. Just 1 second.
Right. Yeah, it's, I mean, yeah.
Catherine, were you going to say something? I saw you raise your hand there a minute ago.
I was going to say we couldn't see.
That the president said he helped free a nation. That means so much to me. That you would organize this. Something else in a letter that really shows his personality is all the questions that he asked. What's going on back home? How did the new car deal turn out? Did you get one? And if so, what year, in kind? Did you have any bushels of grain this year? How's grandma and everyone at home? I dreamed I was at home the other night. Boy, it was okay.
I'm honored that you would share those, Connie, deeply personal notes. I hope
Christine.
that, I'm sorry.
Christine.
My name is
Forgive me, Christine, forgive me for that. But thank you for sharing that deeply personal element of your family story. I hope you preserve it for all future generations of the great Jasper clan. Just very heartwarming and honored that you would think of to share that and care to share it so freely. It means a lot. It adds great unexpected context and texture and color to it.
I've got a small favor to ask, and then I've got a bigger one to ask after.
Here we go.
Small favor, because I know it seems as though we're all locked in separate rooms in the same building. But can you guys give us I know Ambassador Cella is in Suva, but where and you guys are in America, but where exactly in America are you?
Well, we are, and Connie and Christine are in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan at the house where Benny grew up.
Ah.
At the homestead. So the pictures that we sent of the house, that is where we are right now.
We're going to, my dear colleague Violet is walking me through this right here. Bear with me.
Right there is where we are.
Got you. Okay, excellent. Thank you.
By the Great Lakes.
Yes, looks very nice.
It's beautiful here. It is beautiful. So if you ever make it up to the Upper Peninsula, it's definitely a place to travel around and visit.
Well, I've got a very good tour guide in Ambassador Cella. I'll rope him in.
Yes.
You'll have to. So,
it's just a short 8-hour drive.
We'll get it done, Your Excellency. Ben, where are you at? And Catherine, where are you located?
And I'm 200 miles to the south of the farm along the shore of Lake Michigan in the Milwaukee area in the village of Shorewood, Wisconsin.
And how about Ben?
I'm in a small town in Illinois near the Mississippi River called Albany.
Yes, I've heard of Albany. It's normally sung about in country songs.
There's great
It's as famous as Galveston.
great affinity for country music in the South Pacific, and President Aingimea has a great fondness of a number of things. This great city of San Diego, California, being one of them. But the other thing that we'll have to include for your bucket list that he's also fond of is Harley Davidson motorcycles, which Catherine, when we visit you in Wisconsin, we will have to stop at the Harley Davidson plant. Now, one story that he must tell before we continue on with Mark and Stephanie for your introductions, and then off to Ben. President Aingimea, please just talk about the Harley Davidson motorcycles you do have, and the one that let's just say you tricked out a little bit with
yes,
a little bit of World War II flair.
Yes, where my house is located here in Nauru, it used to be part of the Japanese World War II airstrip. And so I grew up basically in our backyard was these shells of Mitsubishi Zeros. So I knew all about these Mitsubishi Zeros. A few years ago, I decided to tick one of the boxes on my bucket list was get a Harley. Got a Harley, then found out that one was not enough, got another one, found out that wasn't enough, got another one. And then it was four, and I grabbed one, and I said, I'm going to basically trick it up. And so I stripped it down, but what I didn't know at that, well, I was going up where we did the phosphate minings, and I saw, and I actually told Joseph Cella that it was the wing of a Mitsubishi Zero. What I did not realize was there was also part of the wing of Coral Princess next to it. I just found that out about a month ago.
Huh.
And so I was taking stuff off both of them. The zero wing and the Coral Princess wing. And then I basically cut open my Harley Davidson and changed it all around using some of the structure of the Coral Princess and the Mitsubishi Zero as for my front pedals for my motorbike, to raise the tank, to change the tail lights and everything, all the wirings and I used big parts of the fuselage to cover holes that the battery used to be and things like that. So I used to use them. And just to get that kind of authentic look, instead of welding it on, I used rivets to make it look like, because they would rivet. Yeah, so I riveted parts of the motorbike. So that's the story. I've got it sitting at home. I don't ride it's very unpresidential to be riding around on a Harley Davidson around the island. So they're parked at home at the moment.
Well, I would like to see a picture.
Yes, I'll send pictures to Ambassador Cella, and he'll send it to you guys.
Yes.
I've shared your story to many in Washington D.C. President Aingimea, and we're seeing if ever we can work out an arrangement to have your bike shipped to showcase.
Yes, but the thing is, like I said, I did not know till about a month ago, because we've got an Australian guy here who he's in big time into World War II, and he gets all this memorabilia from the island. We're trying to putting it part of the museum, and so it was him who told me that parts of the motorbike is actually from the Coral Princess. I said, okay.
Oh,
that's pretty neat. That's pretty neat. Yes.
Breaking news. But thank you for sharing that. I'm just going to share a screen right now with some photos of, let's see, Violet, is this right here? Okay, can everybody see the photos?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, so
yes.
I believe, Stephanie, you are presently at the old farmstead?
Yes, we are there. We're in the dining room. Yes, so we're preparing to move in here in the next couple weeks. So we took over, along with my uncle Mark, who's next to me. My husband and I took over the Sugar Bush almost 2 years ago, and my uncle is our partner. So this is where Uncle Benny grew up. And it pretty much looks very similar to when he lived there, the way it looks now. So that is where we are right now.
And there's another, I guess that's.
So that's a factory.
So here is a photo. I don't know if Catherine, if you're familiar with this, or Christine. Uncle Benedict would be the one on the far right. Would those be his parents?
We got the picture right in front of us on the table.
Actually,
Great.
the picture that you're seeing is of what the house looked like when Uncle Benny lived there. But those are his parents to the left. That was his dad Henry and his mother Josephine. But the person on the far right is my grandfather, Anthony Jasper. So that would be Benedict's younger brother. And he is the one who took over the business in the farm, the Sugar Bush, after Benedict passed away.
And was this photo taken after he had passed away? Does anybody know?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it was.
Wow. Okay. And here's another photo I'll share with you. This is probably from his
Yeah.
boyhood.
Yes.
Yes.
Front row, left to right, were Agnes Jasper, his sister,
Yes.
Yes.
on the far left, and then Edith Mack, Ralph Berger, and then he is in the middle. He is the third from the left, or fourth. Sorry,
Yeah.
with the overalls and boots. So he would be 8 years old in that photo.
I don't know. Was he 8 years old? Was he 8 years in? We're not sure.
Well, he was born in 22, I think, and it says the photo is about 1930. But
Okay, well then you did the math better than we did.
so is the Jasper School still
No.
long gone?
No. It was down the road, kind of at the back side of the property, and it's been gone for quite some time now.
How was it named after your family? Was it just were you the first settlers in Kearney? Is that the
That was a question we had too.
No, but that school was just a small little school in the area, and there was a couple families that went to that school, and I think we were one of the Jaspers were one of the first families in the area, along with Blahniks and some other names. But the school was, I guess, named after the Jaspers because it's right by the edge of the Jasper property.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So,
Here's a couple of photos from probably after his Uncle Benedict's enlistment here, Army Air Corps, and maybe a high school photo there.
Yeah.
yes.
Graduation photo,
That's right.
and then here are a couple of photos. You probably have seen all of these. There's such a copious amount of things you can find online. So this is some photos not taken by me, but another source from there. You still see the wreckage there, scattered amongst the pinnacles, as they call them. And President Aingimea, maybe you could talk just briefly about why pinnacles. This was a source of phosphate mining, as you probably all know, but pinnacles were left for what reason after they mined it out?
Well, basically the pinnacles were left because there was absolutely no monetary value in them. If there was monetary value in them, they would have been broken and taken also. but the only thing that was of monetary value was the phosphate deposits in between the pinnacles. So they would go in between the pinnacles and they would dig. And you would note that this area, just to give you a heads up, this particular area is really, really old. It's a really, really old dig site. Because when the Coal Princess crashed, it crashed onto the pinnacles of an area that was already dug. And this would have been done by Chinese indentured laborers who were brought in basically by the British Phosphate Company. And they would have, all this area would have been dug by hand. And they would put it on baskets and use a cable system to transfer the baskets of phosphate. So this particular area still has rich deposits of phosphate, but it's pretty hard to get to. It's not like modern day mining where we use big machineries and can just get the phosphate out easily and deeply. But back then, this is a really old dig site where it was basically done by hand.
And if you when you go there, I'll say whenever that may be, and I hope I can do it with you whenever that may be. It's a bit of a scene out of Lord of the Rings, almost like prehistoric. You just see these towering pinnacles. It's very rugged ground. It's never not warm there, and very, very humid. So it's quite a thing. And some I think of the Nauruan police force or had tagged the trail that you find. The head of the trail is just past the gun placement that you'll see here in a little bit that down the aircraft. And then it winds away, it's down and then up again. And with fading daylight, we were only able to go so far. So I'll hit to the next one. This is another piece. Looks like part of a wing. And I'll send these all to you so you have them. I mean, in the event that you haven't seen them already.
So is this area kind of, I know you said it, there's a lot of pinnacles. Is it somewhat mountainous with high elevations that you're climbing?
No. These we don't have mountains in Nauru. We had hills. We dug them all out.
Okay.
These goes with the contour of the land. There's some parts that the pinnacles are big and tall, and there's some parts, of course, it's pretty flat. But this is very, I would suppose, if it was back to the original topography, it'll be quite hilly. So some of the pinnacles here are quite tall.
Yeah.
How many?
Yeah, there are some undulations in the trails leading back to it, and I don't know what your peak elevation there is. I mean, you're right at sea level. I mean, maybe the peak elevation would be nothing more than a couple 100 feet, I'd imagine. Correct, President?
Okay.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
So how many wrecks are on that island?
Well, we've got this one was shot. This is the only American wreck we have, but the other wrecks are basically the Japanese Zeros. Because the bombing runs done by the American planes was to hit at most times the runway, just basically put it out of commission. And so there was a lot of wreckage of a lot of Mitsubishi Zeros around the island. Some of them have disappeared. Some of them are put together by people have come and asked for them. Some of them were taken over to the Australian Museum, and I believe they've made able to put together a whole Mitsubishi Zero from the parts that they got from Nauru.
So I have a question. Did it go a long time before it was identified as an American aircraft? I thought I heard you mention that it was.
No, that was for me. But it was, I think it was in the 60s and the 70s when not many people knew about it. It was just I think in the 70s and 80s that news of it started coming to the other parts of the island. Because, I mean, you have to understand that during World War II, the Nauruans were basically kept in one side of the island. So whatever happened in the other parts of the island, nobody knew. I mean,
so they didn't know. They didn't know there was even a wreck there that had happened.
They didn't even know there was even a wreck there. Yes, they didn't even know. It was in the 70s. I think it was in the 60s, 70s that we found out about it.
Okay.
Ben, I think you had asked how many people of what the population of Nauru is. It's roughly 10,000, if I'm not mistaken. Correct, Aingimea?
That's correct. That's correct.
So here you see in this photo, you see one of the engines from the aircraft sitting on top of one of the pinnacles. See the drive shaft right there?
Oh, yes.
It's the propeller.
Yeah. And these are photos that I took in our time there back in early February. Stephanie may have showed these to your, some of these were in the video, so there's actually a little memorial there that somebody left way back when. I don't know, it's laminated. There's different flowers left, and it hangs on a binder clip
Wow.
on one of
The
the
flower is
one of the pinnacles.
the flower is the red poppy. It's done in remembrance of any fallen soldier. It's usually one. We don't celebrate Anzac here, but we stand with the Australians and the New Zealand forces when they do have Anzac Day, and so the red poppy symbolizes fallen soldiers or Armistice Day. Yes,
the same symbolism for the red poppy.
And the photos there of the crew, I think I have a couple of others here coming up, but these were likely taken on, the bottom one was taken on Macon Island. I have a larger photo of that. And the others were likely in the area as well. And this was taken 9 days before their bombing run on Macon.
wow.
And this photo, actually, I took this in a very interesting World War II museum that they have there in Nauru that I hope you can visit when you visit. There's a number of other artifacts that have been discovered. Here is another. This looks like an aileron from the aircraft that's along the trail, and then you start heading down. So this is the base of the gun emplacement. There's a ladder here you can see that the troops is probably a bomb shelter that they would duck into, climb up and down. And this is the actual gun emplacement that took down the Coral Princess.
Oh.
So you sort of walk past that from right to left, and then you head down and up and down into that terrain. And then this is Uncle Benedict's gravestone. I don't know quite where that is. Catherine?
Nato. That's in Nato, Michigan, the home parish. St. Bruno's Church was where he was buried from. It's only 9 miles from the farm.
What city is that in, or village?
Nato, N-A-D-E-A-U, Michigan.
And it's right next to Kearney. Kearney and Nato are together almost.
I see.
It's right next to Kearney, and it's how many miles, Catherine, did you say it was from the farm?
I think it's about 9 miles from the farm.
9 miles from the farm.
And the church is still open?
Yes.
Oh,
That's great.
yeah.
There was a funeral mass for him immediately after on the Tuesday after he died. They had a requiem mass for him at St. Bruno's Church.
So I've read different things online, and one thing online shows that his actual remains are in Minnesota. Is that true, with another one of his crewmates?
Yes, that is
Maybe a
correct.
few of them?
Benny can speak to that.
Oh, okay.
Ben?
Benny, are you there? Benny went out there to the grave.
I've been there too. I have a picture of it here.
Sorry, yeah, I was there.
Yeah.
And he's there with, he's in Fort Snelling with Keeling and Stockton. Yep.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. There we go. They were all buried together.
Yes, because we couldn't separate them.
Yes.
I visited
No, no.
with Benny Krawczyk.
And if I recall, there are some others that are buried in Hawaii, Ben, if I'm not mistaken, and then maybe another one elsewhere in the States. I want to say towards the east. I can't quite recall offhand, but.
Yeah, so Mr. Ambassador, I can talk about the crew a little bit.
Great.
And then I have a piece of information that I think President
And maybe
Aingimea
just,
will like.
you're related again to Uncle Benny and through whom and how?
Well, so I'm a nephew, and I was named after Uncle Benny.
Ah,
Cool.
And I'm Christine's youngest brother. Christine is on Connie's iPhone.
Yeah.
That's why we kind of threw you, Ambassador. We had Christine talking from Connie's iPhone.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I would
I'll-
say,
Very efficient.
okay, yes, we had to throw you a little curve there.
Thanks for the clarification.
Okay. So I can talk. I've got a little information written down about the crew here.
Great.
So I can just review that. The pilot was Carl James. He was a first lieutenant. He was from Blandonsville, Illinois, and I've actually visited his grave site, and I want to talk a little bit about that,
Wow,
what
great.
that meant for me. The co-pilot was Alexander Cheropovich,
Oh,
and he was from Pennsylvania. The navigator bombardier was John Keeling. He's in Fort Snelling. The turret gunner engineer staff sergeant was Harry Stockton. He's also in Fort Snelling with my uncle. And then the radio operator waist gunner was Frank Kapla, and the tail gunner was my uncle. For some reason, Frank Kapla and Carl James are buried in Honolulu, and Cheropovich is buried in Pennsylvania. I'm not sure why they split them all up like that, but that's what happened. So it's my
Oftentimes at the request of the family sometimes.
okay. So yeah, so that's how that worked out. So I understand Uncle Benny flew 50 missions, and I understand that from Kathy's mother, my Aunt Mary, because my mother didn't talk much about, as my sister Christine said, my mother Agnes didn't talk much about her brother. She would quiet down when we got curious and asked questions. So we went to our aunt to get most of this information. And it was also my understanding from Aunt Mary that 30 missions at the time was the standard, that if these young guys flew 30 missions, then they could get a leave. I'm sorry, but I'm a little emotional right now. I'm going through some other things, but I can breathe through this, so stay with me. So Uncle Benny, in his letters, was very excited in the early letters. And then as you read the letters closer to the time when he died, you can tell there's a sense of lonesome. He's getting lonesome for home. He's disappointed they hadn't granted his leave. He's been extended again. So you can imagine to a young man having to fly 20 extra missions before he got his leave was quite a sacrifice. And a lot of times, as President Aingimea pointed out, sacrifice is required to build faith. So I think, what I wrote back to Aunt Mary was, he flew 50 missions, one for every star on the flag of the United States of America.
Wow, awesome.
So we're very proud of Uncle Benny, and we miss him. And how do you miss someone you've never met? Well, it happens. And my mother told me once that Uncle Benny didn't really liked to spend a lot of time with his younger siblings, that he always wanted to be with the older guys. And when she told me that, I remembered that. It didn't feel real good at the time, and I kind of wondered why she spoke like that. But I remembered it. When I went to research the crew members, the pilot and the co-pilot are 5 years older than Uncle Benny, and the radio operator is 9 years older, and the other two guys are the same age. And so it helped me when I visited Blandonsville to feel that Uncle Benny had found his family in the military, and so that when he died, he was not alone, and he was servicing his country. So that helped give me closure, that his sacrifice had really been worth it. And now meeting President Aingimea and hearing his story, it really reinforces that. Okay, I've got two other things that I just want to mention briefly. My great-grandfather, Henry Jasper Sr., actually settled the original land that the homestead is on, where Stephanie is at. And at the time, it was called a railroad 40. And if the government of the United States had a program back in the mid-1880s that if you settled land, then you would own it. And when he went up there, there were no roads. It was just like, it's heavily timbered. So it was just heavily timbered. And he started a sawmill, and then eventually he started a dairy farm. And so that is, that Jasper School really is named that because he was the original set. My great-grandfather, that would be my grandfather Henry's father.
Fascinating. Hey, Ben, one thing you mentioned, if you could roll back, you had said it was a railroad depot declared by, what was it from the federal government? Your signal up there for a second, if you could repeat that.
Okay, the federal government had a program in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which was not settled at the time. It was basically Native Americans living there.
Wow.
And the program was called a Railroad 40, which is 40 acres of land.
Interesting. Okay.
So if our original German ancestors actually lived in Wisconsin, between Milwaukee and Nato, Michigan, where my uncle's buried. And so they moved, my great-grandfather moved from Wisconsin, near Green Bay, Wisconsin, to Nato, Michigan. Well, actually, it's not Nato, it's Gurley Township, which could well be named Jasper Township because my great-grandfather was actually there before Mr. Gurley. So, little plug there.
We better start a campaign, Ben.
So,
a renaming drive.
So,
10 a.m.
He started that. He settled that land basically before there were even roads. He walked in and started a sawmill, and then sold the sawmill, and then eventually started a dairy farm.
And when did the sugar bush? Did it take root with your grandfather?
You'll have to ask one of the Jaspers, either Mark or Connie.
Well, I know that there were Native Americans making maple syrup on that land before the Jaspers did, and but the Jaspers started tapping the trees immediately back in the 1880s.
So just to get myself corrected on this one. So the Native Americans were making maple syrup way before anybody was making maple syrup.
Yeah.
That is correct. And
Here I was thinking it was an invention of the latter centuries.
Yeah, they showed the settlers in the area how to make maple syrup when the settlers settled the area. The Native Americans showed them how to make it, how to collect the sap and boil it down, and so that's where that came from.
Yeah, our grandmother our grandmother, Josie Jasper, told me that when she was a little girl, she remembers that Native Americans, the Indians, would come sometimes and stay overnight. And she said she remembers these big men with big blankets in the wintertime would come, and her father and mother would let them come in and stay around the fire, and they would stay the night. And Grandma Josie was a little girl, and she said they were very quiet. They were very strong and proud people, and they appreciated the hospitality. And in the morning, they would move on. And many, many years later, I met a neighbor of mine who was a Menominee Indian, and he told me that when he was a child, his family, they did not stay in hotels or motels, or they usually didn't even have cars to travel with, but they went by word of mouth which families you could trust. And he said, our family must have been one of those families that could be trusted. And my grandmother remembers that her grandfather always welcomed them. And she was a little girl and saw them standing there in the night and laying down around the fire in the living room.
What a beautiful account.
Yeah, very nice. Yes.
Heartwarming. And so much of there are other stories like that, President Aingimea, of the Native Americans, of what the early settlers learned from like early composting. They would bury fish at the base of various things to let the organic material help give nitrogen and so forth to its growth. And I'd also be remiss, and Stephanie may have shared this with you, but I do have relatives in Marquette and have traveled in and out of there. And then many a time, it's a beautiful land. I look forward to our road trip, Mr. President. Certainly meeting the entire.
We'll do it on Harleys.
The Jasper clan on Harleys.
Yeah, yes.
I say one thing before you all leave. Our family were immigrants to this land, and the native people of this land helped us to survive. And I have family members now. One is an immigrant from Iraq. He was a refugee.
Wow.
His father was killed. I have a daughter-in-law whose family comes from the South Pacific. And I know that there are refugees in Nauru. And I know that it would be in honor of my family who had compassion for others and did everything they could to help a neighbor, anyone in need, to know that the Nauruans are helping refugees.
Thank you very much.
Well,
I hope that they will give all the help they can.
President Aingimea is a man of God. His father was, and in fact, the roots of the people, they're beautiful, warm, loving people, and in fact, it's manifested in their motto, which is God's will first, which says a lot. And Ben, go ahead.
I can high five you, Ben.
One last story. This is for you, President Aingimea. My mother, in her youth, living in the Upper Peninsula, there weren't very many jobs. We call it the Upper Peninsula of Michigan because there's also the Lower Peninsula of Michigan. So they would go to the cities, Milwaukee or Chicago, for summer work. And one summer, my mother, Agnes Jasper, went to Milwaukee and was a housekeeper for Mr. Davidson.
Wow.
And she remembers him.
We think you got connection.
She remembers him driving his motorcycle to and from work every day. So I thought you would appreciate
Wow.
How many
I
times?
appreciate that.
That's like our third or fourth moment of breaking news. Ben,
We're doing better than CNN.
Ben, thank you for that. Stephanie, did you want to just introduce yourself and those that are there with you, and any reflections you wish to share? Maybe how you and I and the random ambassador calls you out of the blue.
Well, my name is Stephanie Klee, and as I said before, my husband and I are now part owners in the Sugar Bush with my uncle Mark Jasper. Let's see. And so we make the maple syrup here and in the spring, and so a few months ago, I believe, was it January that you called? February. Okay. So Mr. Ambassador called and left a message on our voicemail, and so my husband says, well, there's a message. He listened to the message, and I had to listen to it several times before I could understand exactly what was happening and what he was trying to say. And I almost thought it was a scam.
I'm her mother.
And my mother, who is sitting next to me, Connie, tells me, that's a scam. That's a scam.
It was just me, Connie.
I'm like, so.
See, Ambassador Cella never told me this story. He told me he was going to contact the Jasper family in Michigan, but that was it.
Yeah, so I did some research on Mr. Cella, and I realized, well, he seems pretty legit. So I'll give this guy a chance. And I'll allow him to talk to me on the phone.
Very merciful. Very merciful.
I said it.
And charitable.
So I think the whole time we had the first conversation, I was a little bit reserved, and I was a little defensive because I didn't want to be taken advantage of.
Brave soul.
So I allowed him to tell his story, and he seemed like he was pretty sincere about his story. So I figured he was pretty real.
I passed the Jasper test.
Yeah.
Sorry to be so critical, but
No, I love it. I love it. Fire away.
It's not every day you get the ambassador to Fiji calling you, so I had to be a little bit defensive in the beginning.
Smart move.
Yeah. And then
It's not your normal circle.
I get questions about the story, and so
My wife would agree with you, by the way. She'll shake her head on the story later.
Yeah. So I get questions about the story because, we're having a meeting. You're having a meeting? Well, yeah, well, who are you having a meeting with? Well, and so it's kind of like, this is a true story. It's a true story, I promise. Yeah, so it's been interesting, but we definitely appreciate you guys calling and getting in touch with us. It means a lot to our family, and we've enjoyed sharing your visit to the crash site, and certainly the history of Nauru. We do appreciate that. So thank you very much.
We are honored and delighted to have you all with us
Yes.
on a Sunday. And the beautiful connections that have been made, the bridge building that has happened between Nauru and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan now. And President Aingimea, I will be certain to share with you when we next meet, hopefully sooner rather than later, some of the actual maple syrup from Jasper Farms. We're purchasing some for our July 4th party coming up. That will probably be more like the September 4th party at this rate. To give you a little foretaste, literally, of your trip there.
Excellent.
And again, we keep our doors open for the entire Jasper clan, and look forward to meeting in person in the not too distant future, I hope. And does
Thank you
anybody
very
else
much. Well,
have any other
Thank you.
closing reflections or remarks or from the family or you, Mr. President?
well, first, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to your family for having sent a father. I won't say an uncle because under our tradition, an uncle is a father. Sending a father to travel many miles to countries he's never heard of, and to be able to have an input into the freeing of a people, of a nation, of a custom, of a culture. And for us to be able to continue enjoying that, because people we have never met, families we have never met, but whom we have met today, have gladly given that sacrifice. Not many people can do that. To be able to say, I had a loved one who gave their life really for the freedom of another. Scripture tells us that no greater love has a man for another than to lay his life for another. And for what your father did, as a president of my country, on behalf of my people, thank you very much. In Nauru, we say, Age Wamewewe, he's our hero. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very poignant. Thank you so much. Any other closing thoughts or reflections amongst the Jasper family?
I just want to say we're in a time of terrible crisis in the world, but there are so many good people, and I'm grateful to have met some of them.
Right back at you, Catherine, and look forward to a face-to-face meeting at some point in the future. We'll keep Uncle Benedict in our prayers in a special way today. Repose for the repose of his soul and the comfort of you, and that you all keep shining brightly as you do in such a wonderful way. And I'll be sure to send this recording to you, and feel free to share it if you wish, or and keep it as you wish for your family.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.